Thank you, Mihai, for the introduction. Um, I hope the projects are doing great. I know some of you are very tired. I've seen some people sleeping in the morning here. Hopefully you'll get some rest when you go back home. Mihai told me about some exciting projects, which I'm very much looking forward to see. But today, I just want to provide some key takeaways that we've learned during developing XAI, and also in general on how you can leverage language models to build better tools, build faster, and maybe with higher performance. So language models nowadays seem to be helping us explore so much of the world, and not only explore, but ideate, understand, and build products. And although they do so much for us, I feel like, funnily enough, they are misunderstood. And why is that? So being an AI builder for years, I'm often in conversations with people that tell me that, okay, I've got ChatGPT giving me some wrong answers, or I've made a joke about some celebrities or presidents that it shouldn't do, or it hallucinates answers that aren't just true. And for me, that's just a wake-up call, because people do not really understand how they work. And the fact is, language models do not actually store any type of information. There's no autobiography of Steve Jobs in any database anywhere in ChatGPT. It doesn't have access to a database where it can query specific questions or can find specific information. Everything it does is just next word prediction. So it's optimized for generating the next word in a sequence of other tokens or words within a sentence or a phrase. So for example, if you have Tom is a, and here's a Tom and Jerry reference, I know, you'll get the next word in the sequence would be a cat. And that's what it does. It learns relationship between words. So that's one of the pitfalls, actually, of where we see developers taking a first wrong step, is the fact that they rely on relationship between words and try to extract factual information. You try to extract real-world, truthful information by relying on a mechanism that simply works on relationship. And how it does it is it relies on attention. And attention is just a fancy mathematical mechanism that describes how a word relates to another and so on. And it just allows you to optimize these models for next word prediction. So if there's one thing that I would like everybody of you to know and go home with, is that language models do not store knowledge, do not expect truthful information when you ask anything, and yeah, just don't complain too much about it on Twitter, because there are thousands of tweets already telling how ChatGPT got it wrong again. But then, if it doesn't store knowledge, and you cannot ask it specific questions regarding specific topics, how do you do it? And that's where we're building knowledge systems. And at XAI, the tool that Mihai has just shown you, we leverage language models by creating a multi-agent architecture. What does that mean? It's like having a team of maybe 4 or 5 developers. One of them knows very well how to write unit tests. The other understands the ecosystem and writes very well integration tests. Then we have people that are so knowledgeable about the documentation that exists in the company and how it's used and what are the features and what can you use in specific scenarios. And having this team of digital developers that are available to you and building a knowledge ecosystem around it, or a knowledge base around it, then allows you to actually create those unit tests that actually run, compile, and test your code. And it's not invented information, it's information created by using the code that you've written. And don't think of it as somebody that's going to replace your team. It's not. It's, for example, there's a reason why GitHub's tool is called Copilot and not a pilot. It will not pilot the plane for you, but it will assist you while you're doing a great job in building products. So that's what xAI does. It just is there to support you in building and shipping products faster and serving the users that use your products. So for extracting factual information, you need to build context. And by context, I mean get documentation, write good documentation, provided enough information on which it is able to generate answers, and create knowledge systems, because there are a lot of limitations that we see. And all of those limitations aren't within models. Though all of them, or 99% of them, are within knowledge systems that we build. And those are hard software engineering tasks that we need to solve in order to leverage these language models to the maximum. So next time when you think about a language model not being able to reason some prompt that you've given it, or not being able to understand the challenge and just think that it's garbage, or not being able to tell you what's the price of Ethereum or eGold because it has only information to 2021, it's not that it can learn that. It's almost useless to give it information by 2023 because it will still be able to hallucinate. It will still not provide truthful information. So think about how you build better knowledge systems. Now, the next topic that I want to talk about is just development efficiency in general. And this is a study that always makes me wonder on why these tools don't have an even larger adoption. They're already very much adopted, but they should do more. Because, and this is a study done by Microsoft and GitHub, and they've seen developers feel more productive. They've seen developers complete tasks quicker, be more in the flow, that magical state that I'm sure you've been in during the last night while you were building your products. You complete repetitive tasks much quicker. And in terms of xAI, how many people actually like to write unit tests? Nobody. I despise writing unit tests. And that's why we're building these tools, to help developers stay creative, stay in the flow, build products, and so that users have better products to build. And one thing that Elon Musk always says, and I very much like, is the fact that if you're not building stuff, you don't have stuff. It's simple as that. So I feel like tools based on AI and language models are now helping us, and the evidence shows it, helping us be more in the flow, spend less time figuring out issues and bugs and so on. And I'm actually curious, how many of you have used ChatGPT or any language model within the last 2 weeks, to say? Yeah, it's most of the room, I would say. And probably many of you have used it during the last night. So that would be a very good example of the fact that you definitely need it in your development process. And just quickly, I want to tell you just a bit about some of the tools that we use on a daily basis and help us a lot to speed up our development process or to build better tools with language models. And first on the list is LangChain. LangChain is just a framework that allows you to very easily swap language models that you use for certain tasks. You don't have to rewrite code. You don't have to rewrite API calls. You still have the same exact code that you have, and you just swap the language model you use. It can be on Azure, it can be on OpenAI, it can be something that you run in a cluster on your GPU at home. You can use LangChain to connect to any of those, swap them in production, swap them in development mode. It will work just fine. We like it a lot. Then Find is a nice tool built in San Francisco that leverages GPT-4 from OpenAI, but it does so by also connecting sources. So if you ask it for a question, it will also give you Stack Overflow links, Google links, and it will provide a lot of documentation that you can use to solve the problem. It's not just generating text. Postgres Vector is a very, very nice addition to Postgres. I'm sure all of you are familiar with the SQL database. Now, Vector allows you to store embeddings, index embeddings, and find them very quickly to create knowledge systems within Postgres. So you don't have to spin up some fancy new graph cluster to store your vectors. You can store them directly in Postgres. They're fast, and they work very well. And the last one on the list is TeamGPT. It's not a fancy tool. It's just a tool that you can use with your team by giving it an OpenAI token for API access. It can be a token that you get from an OpenAI service on Azure, and it's data compliant, and it can run in Europe in case you're processing private data of your users. So you keep all of your data to yourself. You don't have to send it necessarily to OpenAI. It's like a black box that lives within your infrastructure on Azure. So it's very cool. And TeamGPT is just a chat interface where you can collaborate with your team on doing prompt engineering, on solving challenges. It's like having an assistant in your conversation. So sometimes when you're ideating on how to solve something, instead of being on Slack or on Teams and messaging endlessly, maybe you could move that conversation to TeamGPT and have another voice there help you solve the challenge much quicker. So that's how we use it. And actually, a funny thing is that somehow in my network, somebody knows the founder of TeamGPT, and I'm actually working now with them to see what the next features would be. That's completely unexpected. I wasn't aware of this until yesterday. But hopefully we can work with them and provide more and more features of language models within TeamGPT. So that's pretty much it for my conversation. So if there are 2 takeaways that you can go home with is 1, don't expect language models to provide you truthful information unless 2, you build very good knowledge systems. And that's where the most of the effort goes into. If you have any questions, I'm not sure if there are. Okay, I see a hand.
Quite a few.
So
yeah.
I don't see very well here.
Hello. Actually, for this hackathon, I built a chatbot that basically serves information about documentation for MultiversX.
Ah, nice.
Yeah, with an UI made in Next.js. I saw that you were using LangChain, so that was my choice as well, even though it's pretty young framework.
It's very much in the works. Yeah.
Yeah, but I love the abstraction in it, that you can switch very easily between the LLMs.
Yep.
Again, as a similarity, I saw you were using PG Vector.
Yep.
That was my choice as well,
Nice.
as using Supabase, because we can do with a single dashboard, a single project, we can do more stuff. Like don't have it one vector story in VV8 and the authentication in Supabase and stuff like that. So we have all our logic in one place.
Nice.
Why was your choice PG Vector instead of some well-known vector stores like VV8, Pinecone, and
Yeah. Yep. Thank you for the question, and I would say good choice of tooling. One caveat on LangChain, yes, it's very much in the works. It's ever evolving, so make sure that when you maybe reach its limitations, or if you feel like you're battling it, don't feel afraid of moving into just using the SDK if you have a very specific use case, but make sure that you also split the problem as much as possible so you have less of those blocks that you would be forced to rewrite in case you would find another model or the structure of calls changes or something like that. To answer specifically your question, so for us, we do have, well, not limitations, but we do have already an environment that works. And with XAI, we're actually building a language layer across MultiversX products. And most of these products use a specific database hosted in a specific way that needs, that in order to reduce latency, you would need them to be within the same space. So I'm not saying that it's a limitation, it's just a choice based on the context at hand. Sometimes when you have a hammer, everything tends to look like a nail, and you just nail stuff. I'm not saying PG Vector is your hammer. I'm just saying use the right tooling whenever you have a challenge. This was just a general recommendation because most of the tools, I guess more than half of the tools will use at one point some Postgres instance in some cluster. You already have the environment. You don't need to spin up a new environment.
Yeah.
Just don't add more complexity to code just for the sake of having a fancy name on your list of technologies.
Makes
sense. So that's why was it recommended, but it's again not a hammer.
Yeah, it makes sense. That was my reasoning as well, and I heard that it will get an upgrade in performance, the PG Vector with the new version. I don't know. I'm not sure if I read it right. And a last question.
Yeah.
You're using the models from OpenAI, so ChatGPT-4. Have you taken in consideration running local open source LLMs, I don't know, like GPT-4J, Llama, or stuff like that, in order to reduce costs with API calls?
Yes, we have. We're actually experimenting with Llama 2, specifically the larger models, 70 billion parameter models. When you said reduced costs, that's actually a partial observation, because currently to run such a model, you need around 75 gigs of VRAM. It costs you around 1.5 thousand per month to run such a model.
So to scale it, it's pretty expensive.
To scale, and it's only a waterfall type system where one request runs after the other. You cannot load the model multiple times into VRAM. So to scale it, it costs more, but again, some specific small tasks can indeed be moved to a smaller model that can run those and don't have a limit on tokens, and you don't get to pay for tokens. So maybe sometimes in the future that's the way to go. Currently, with the usage and the testing and the adoption that we have, I think it's a better approach to just pay for what you use, although you pay a bit more per token. But overall, we're still under that. We're still keeping under that threshold of thousands and thousands on infrastructure to just run some models.
Yeah, and GPT-4 provides quality.
And it's also a very, very good model. And now with the latest updates on Azure, you can actually run it in Europe, which is amazing. I've read about it recently, and it's nice. And you don't have to send data anywhere to OpenAI or whatnot.
Yeah, so privacy. Thanks.
Cool.
That's it for me.
Cool. Mihai, I guess we're out of time, right?
We can take one more question.
Okay.
Yeah.
There.
Thank you for the talk. What do you think about building products around ChatGPT? So would you say that when somebody finds a use case or a niche market and thinks about building something around an API that is basically a black box, and with all the risks of having your whole business on top of OpenAI, so to say, they can change their mind, they can change their pricing, they can decide to just come after your market. What's your thoughts on this?
Well, the competition will always be there. There are always the Googles and the Metas of the world that just can come out for your product, and that just means that you have a killer product usually. So it's not an issue. In terms of relying on third-party services that you have to pay for and that are out of your control, that is a concern. if you have a larger product. So that's why once you scale, it may make sense to look into the open source community, which I think is now very, very vibrant, and we see a lot of updates there. I think when you look at benchmarks, Llama 2, the largest model, is very, very close to benchmarking as well as GPT 3.5, and it has been done in less amount of time. So it's not impossible to think that in the next even months, maybe, we'll get better and better open source models that you can leverage for your product and for your business. And then you don't have to rely on OpenAI. But again, you have to use the best tools to solve a problem for your customers. And what you can do to make sure that you're not trapped or vendor locked at any time is to use frameworks such as LangChain or other frameworks that might come out to make sure that your language models are swappable, that you can use at one point in time an open source project, or you can use a smaller model to solve some specific small tasks, and always try it out. Make sure that you actually need so much compute. Make sure you need GPT-4. Make sure you need any model from OpenAI. Maybe you're good with a Mistral model, a Llama model that's 7 billion parameters or something very, very small. It's more about, again, going back to like a broken record to the knowledge system that you build around it, and the model becomes more useful as the knowledge system scales. Thank you for the question. Okay, thanks.